Kia ora. How you doing, Shai?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Geoff. Really looking forward to this.
Yeah, so let's, can we get that live stream?
Doing a second term. What's your bottom line? What do you want?
As we've repeatedly said, we don't have bottom lines, but we have top priorities, and they are focused on handing our grandchildren a stable climate, protecting our environment, and making sure everyone has enough to live with dignity.
So that's all aspirational. What's the bottom line?
Again, like we've repeatedly said, that goes back to our members. That is up to what amount of party votes we get on election night.
Would you like to be the Deputy Prime Minister?
Again, that is something that we will not negotiate through the media,
How about
Simon.
James?
We all know the Green Party don't have any bargaining power because they'll only go with Labour.
And that will go back to
and neither do ours.
And controlled by their membership.
It's
not evident.
But your strategy this time, do you think you've been too negative this election and this term?
Not at all. Look, we combined with Labour to pass 190 pieces of legislation. That's serious cooperation. But we're in a campaign now. Surely you understand that we're all campaigning as separate parties. Otherwise, we'd be a one-party state.
Are you still using the bad boys of Brexit?
No, of course not.
You're not? Did you sack them?
Winston's doing well to sit on that stool, though. You have to give him that.
They said they were working for you.
Oh, look, I mean, I didn't want to come on here and talk about what
too
you
early
suspect.
for those jokes,
I don't know. I mean, this should
Never
be
too early.
close into the campaign. At the worst time in this country's economic history. We better get serious tonight.
Okay.
I'm not expecting any policy to be coming out of Winston's. They virtually have nothing but bullet points.
Well,
there's nothing on their website. It's incredible.
In a past life with National.
They're just campaigning on being a handbrake.
Any more facts you want?
David Seymour, you could be a power broker, couldn't you? But you don't want to work with Labour. Is there anything?
So no bargaining power. Seeing a trend here, guys?
It seems pretty difficult, doesn't it? I mean, you look at what they did with charter schools. They say they put children at the centre of everything, and then they closed them down and reopened them the next day with two changes. One, no performance requirements, and two, they had to use union contracts. I mean, people that do things like that are very difficult to work with.
All right, so you can't work them at all. There's nothing, even say the job that Judith Collins says that you'd be pretty good at?
No, because that shows their priorities.
No evidence that charter schools work either.
Who never get a chance. We're getting a chance at charter schools, and the Labor Party closed them down and decimated them in order to pay off their union mates. And I just can't work with people that would do that.
All right, so you can't work with them. I guess that rules.
So basically, there's no one that's willing to work with National
look, I'm never
Labour.
been too interested in the job.
With New Zealand first out, New Zealand now has no.
It's not so much about where we are.
No central party.
Where the bus is going. And a party vote for ACT is about how do we get Taiwan smart about COVID? How do we have an honest conversation about the debt, because the spending spree is out of control. Those are the sorts of things that we're interested in. The issues rather than the baubles.
Okay, John Tamahiri, your co-leader has told us that you're happy to be on the crossbenches, but don't you owe Māori a seat at the table like they had last time?
All parties want a seat at the table that are here. The question is, what price do you pay for that?
Right.
Okay? So
you're not willing to pay a price for it?
Well, no. We're building an enduring Māori political movement that bows to no Pākehā control mechanism in Labour, National, wherever it might be. And so this election is about resetting our compass as a people going forward and determining a whole range of policies that are intergenerational.
Can I ask you then, are you serious about getting back into power, because you are 7th on the list?
Well, that is a tikanga Māori issue. Okay, so my co-leader leads out at number 1. As a co-leader, I look after the mana of my people between me. So there's only 7 Māori seats. There's 2 elections going on in this election, one for mainstream seats, and then there's the Māori electorate. The Māori electorate, both in first past the post and in MMP, have determined who has held the Treasury benches.
Winston Peters, you've had quite a week. The SFO released its findings on the New Zealand First Foundation.
Understatement.
And you say that you've been exonerated. So I can't understand why you're still crying foul about it.
Have they been exonerated, Shai?
Would hardly classify it as being exonerated, just that they were successful in finding a loophole in our rules.
As to who they were charging.
Not the same thing.
So everybody was implicated at that point in time. And anybody with any
Our
sense
funding
of natural
system
justice
has loopholes so big you can race horses through them.
More importantly, Jamie Lee Ross and the people who are being charged in the National Party.
I mean, actually, though, what this decision did
in the court. Now, there's
and I
a
might
massive
explain
difference,
it more in
and
the
I just
break.
want there to be.
Well,
I
these
want there
people's
to
names
be.
have been suppressed. They're not given. They haven't been
No,
given
no,
that.
no. But
He's
you're
not saying
saying
anything
that
useful,
they should have
Shai.
been. That's the emphasis
Okay.
of your question.
No,
All
The
I'm
people
asking
that
for,
got
all I'm
charged
asking for
are the people
is the
who
same law for
the
my party
party
as every other party.
ring-fenced responsibility
I just wonder
around so
whether
that they
you're
would share the
preparing this
blame
as an
if anything
excuse
went
in
wrong.
case
Right.
They
don't
created
get
a
back into
separate
power, given the
entity
current
over here, the
Well, see, now you're
foundation,
back on the polls. Now,
and it's
look,
only the foundation
sure we're
that
the
has been
underdog.
charged.
And how many times
Even
in our
though
career
the
have we been the
party
underdog?
created the foundation
Time after time
to
after
get
time.
funds for the
Because
party
you've made
and
us that,
spend
just like
stuff
now. But
for the
out there,
party.
there are
So it's
thousands,
basically
hundreds of thousands of
laundering
forgotten
money.
New Zealanders.
It's
Just
exactly
waiting to
it.
tell you
Right.
who runs the country. They're the
So
kings,
top,
they're the
so
queens,
top
and they'll
right
make
now
the
could
change on
create
election
a
day.
separate
Sure.
vehicle.
I mean, I know you don't like talking
Let's
about polls,
call
but
it
one
the
last
Shai
point on
Fund,
that.
and we
The
could
last time in
flood money
2008,
into that,
right,
and we
you
could
were
spend $1
polling
million on my
3%,
North
you
Shore
returned
campaign
4%,
and
and
say,
you were out.
well, it wasn't us, it
This
was the
time it's
Shai Fund.
1-2%.
And guess
You
what?
might pick
That
up a
is
little
what
bit,
Winston
but
did.
you know, should history repeat
I'm
itself?
glad you said
New
that.
Zealand
I
history
am
is compulsory now.
pleased
Winston
you're
Peters.
here tonight because you've raised the stigma of 2008. Remember what the allegation was back then? Laid by the ACT Party against me with the Serious Fraud Office. I was utterly exonerated, but it was too late. Just like Hillary Clinton and the Comey allegations against her. So all
No,
I'm
because
asking
there's
New Zealand
actually
people to
charges in
do
this case,
is
so
to
you
look at
cannot
what's
compare
fair
those
and
two
right
things
here
at
and not have
all.
one law applied
It just
to one
happens
party.
that the charges
There
aren't
are four
on your head,
investigations
they're
going
on the
at
people
moment
that you set up,
with the
basically.
SFO.
Yeah, but yours was one of the earlier ones, and so it's just the
Oh,
timeline
no,
that's coming
sorry.
through.
No. The mayoralty in Auckland and Wellington and Christchurch were earlier. John knows
So
that. He's a
both
lawyer, so
national
am I.
and
The
New
second
Zealand
thing is the
First
National
are
the
in
Labour Party's
court
case
over
goes
our
back to
funding
2007.
system.
So
Labor's
please don't
being
tell me for the first
investigated.
time ever, the SFO puts a
Effectively,
timeline on a
and
hearing, on
National
an
try and play it
investigation,
cute by
which
saying, well,
they've
Jamie
never
Lee
done
Ross isn't
before.
with
It's
us
against
anymore.
their policy.
Yes, but he
I'm not here to
committed to
waste my time with them.
defending
All right,
or
well,
alleged
let's-
defending
agree
whilst
with
he
what
was
just
with
said.
you.
The
So it's
timeline is
cute
very
for you
clear.
to say, well, it's
A
not
whole
national
range of
anymore,
donations.
only
And
because
I
he
don't
left the
want to
party
get,
after.
specific about race, but
That doesn't
huge
mean you
dollars
get
from
to wash your
Chinese
hands of it
people
altogether.
went into the Labour Party coffers. This is all under investigation.
And national.
But in 2017,
They're both not here to defend themselves,
That's
obviously.
No,
And yet-
look,
and yet
I think
none
it's
of the
been
major
terrible.
party leaders
on a
are
number of
willing
things.
to
So-
have a review into funding. I just find this
But you've got to be fair. You know, we're Kiwis. We've got to be a bit fair.
Okay, well,
Simon,
glad you guys are mates.
Simon, there is a solution for this, and if other political parties would support the Green Members Bill and the Green Drive to clean up political donation, to reform our donation laws and get big money out of politics, that would also make sure that we are agreed and transparent to people where our political
Have you
influence
guys
is
got a
coming
trust?
from.
I actually
Have you guys
really
got a trust?
agree with the Greens.
I'm not sure because I'm kept in line.
Have you ever trusted?
about
I'm
cats,
kept-
and
oh,
it's
I
a really
definitely
important
have
conversation.
Let's ask Dave
I
Simmons, do you have a
really
trust?
don't.
Except
No,
the
is there an
Greens
act
forget that there are
party
parties
doesn't
outside
need to-
Parliament.
So you have a
that-
foundation?
No, we ask people for donations.
Their
and we
bill
report
doesn't
them and
recognise
record them
that.
just like the law says, and just like everyone else should do. Can I just say, in Marama's defence, the one thing our two parties have in common, we're the only ones in Parliament that are not being investigated by the Serious Fraud Office.
That's
Okay.
a bit
Fair point.
true. That's a bit
On the other hand, you look on the electoral
It's a bit
committee,
true.
you look at the electoral commission website, how many big dollar donations have come to the Greens lately? Gee, that must be embarrassing.
That is
We'll-
an absolute
we'll
hypocrite.
be
He got
transparent and honest and
160k
open
from one
about
guy
that.
in
Okay.
one month.
And at least you declare
One
that. Good on
man,
you.
160k.
Well, David Seymour, can I ask you, I mean, you
didn't
might
get
have
all
a few
that.
mates in Parliament this time around.
Yeah,
Are you
big.
confident that you can run a caucus? I don't think you were probably expected to have so many possible MPs.
Well, it's not other people's expectations that matter, but not to be braggarly, but the parliamentary service,
on.
they actually asked me to write some advice for incoming MPs on managing their team because they thought I was one of the better employers in Parliament. So, I just thought I'd get that out
Watching
there.
Seymour run his
and I think,
caucus
if you look
after
at
this
Acts,
election
actually,
is
it's
going to
not
be
just
the most
caucus,
fun part about the
it's
next
the board,
Parliament, I
it's the
would say.
membership, it's the
gonna
staff.
be-
Leading an organisation
Well,
is quite
absolute-
fun.
He's a recipient of the house burning down. That's the National House, right? And so Judith's job is to save the furniture, right? What she doesn't understand is Dave is out the back taking a lot of it out.
Good line, JT, good line.
JT, if all that's true, why is no one voting for you?
Oh, hang on, yes, Winston.
When it's all over and they've lost, then they'll be all sharing the furniture in the back bench and doing nothing at all for the country. Every promise they will have made between the National Party and ACT will be forlorn and wasted because they're not going to make it.
Okay, let's talk some policy then.
Excellent.
Okay, let's talk COVID, the pressing issue. John Tamahiri, do you want to wait for a vaccine before the borders reopen?
No, I think we've done an extraordinary job as a nation. And I think now we've geared up all our systemics, okay?
Right, so you're happy now?
No,
Because
well,
previously you were saying...
I'm not happy. What I want us to do is target those populations that are vulnerable, okay? Our elders, doesn't matter what colour, race or breed. Secondly, I want us to target Māori and Pacific Island people whose respiratory issues are legendary.
Right.
And thirdly, those with premorbidities or problems. If you continue waiting for a vaccine heading down the track, we've got a few problems. So what we want to do is concentrate all our resources, not on lockdowns and clean off the economy, but rather on actually a better management system. And we've got a great health system. I think our people also, the discipline of New Zealanders has been extraordinary, right?
Marama Davidson, the Greens, I would say, have been somewhat quieter on COVID. So why is that? Is that because you're just towing the Labor Party line?
It was really important to support a public health first approach. That was the best thing for our whānau in our communities and our businesses. So that was really clear. But we do have a responsibility through our COVID response to make sure with all this money that we're pouring into communities that it's going to set us up for good green infrastructure, for climate resilience, environmental protection, and everyone having enough.
We'll talk about COVID economies soon, but I just guess it's the policy at the border, right, that is trying to keep COVID out. And I haven't seen any Green Party policy on that.
Well, again, we've been supporting a public health first approach. What I hear, going back to the question about vaccines, what I hear is that even if and when we get a vaccine, it may not be the sort of solve all that people are hoping. So again, we need to make sure our contact tracing systems are in place, but our health system is enough to cope as well.
All right. Keeping people in isolation is not your favourite thing, is it? Unless they're in an Airbnb, David Simmons. That seems to be your policy, isn't it? So when the returnees come in, you're happy for them to be in an Airbnb. Is that correct?
Well, I think you're being a bit mischievous. I've used one example of one of the things that Taiwan has done. But our wider point is that only one country actually gets this thing. They had 12 times fewer deaths per head of population than we did with no lockdowns. And they did that by having really smart rules of the game, by having an epidemic command centre that's multidisciplinary and public and private sector, by using better technology and weighting their approach to risk.
I mean, that's
and
the big
always
difference.
Striving to be better and be better prepared. So those are the sorts of principles that we've brought to the table.
So do it like Taiwan. Okay.
I think we could do a lot worse than being more like Taiwan.
Well, just finally, Winston Peters, I mean, you've mentioned that you wanted to bring the military in
He's been pushing for a long time for privatisation
quite a while afterwards.
Quarantine, and now he realises it's a terrible idea, so he's trying to backpedal.
It's sort of defeated two ways of COVID.
Oh, look, this country has done tremendously well, particularly given this country and what we thought we weren't, and we proved that we were, capable of cooperating. But the cohesion and the cooperation is a very, very delicate thing. If people don't go on believing we're doing the right thing, it could so easily collapse it, and this would be a disaster. Look, Taiwan, in this sense, is under 500 cases and 7 deaths. But they did have a serious implementation of the most strict rules. They got an app which we should have had, and we've been offered one and we didn't take it up. An app that
New Zealand had a public health commission much like Taiwan back in 1995, but the national government scrapped it back then.
So we should have the military from
work. But successive governments that haven't prepared us for this.
We had to be at our maritime
and we really started on the back foot
on alert all the time. You say, your original question was, well, what if we don't get a vaccine? Well, the fact is we're praying for a vaccine every darn day.
Yeah.
But we may not, like AIDS, for example,
we have to be tight
after 4 decades, get one. But what we've got to do is, no, look, this is important. You've got to tighten up our system real tight. We can have bubbles between other countries, but the protocols have got to be
we might come to
capable of being enforced.
Okay. All right, just before we go, one quick fire question really quickly to you all. If you could poach an MP from another party here tonight, who would you like to have in your own caucus? Marama.
Nanaia Mahuta.
David Seymour.
You mean poach as in like poached egg, or get them onto your side? Because the answer could be...
Well, the choice is yours, really, isn't it? Although somewhat dark.
Oh, look, I'm very focused on bringing more ACT MPs in, so I haven't thought about that.
John Tamahiri, anybody else?
What a dodge.
Of the present people.
Yeah, you don't have to choose these guys of their parties.
Well, none.
Okay.
Andrew Liddell.
Anybody else?
Andrew Liddell, right.
it might sound strange, but there are many MPs that I seriously do admire.
I'd probably go David Parker or James Shaw.
This guy was fired with a lie.
Shaw, one of those
got his job back.
Solid.
I always believed that he was an honest guy. His name was David Parker.
Okay. Thanks very much.
That's all. Agree on something.
Coming up more from our potential.
Jeff's going to have an identity crisis, everyone. This is not good. Is that the first time you've ever agreed on anything?
Potentially. Oh, and we've got a Judith ad straight off the bat. A national
ad. Wow, that's interesting, isn't it?
Did you want to talk more about during the ad break, Shai, about your about the point around the SFO stuff?
I do. Yes, thank you, Geoff. You reminded me. Yeah, I think this is really important, everyone. So this week, the SFO announced their decision. We had known since February that they were investigating the New Zealand First Foundation, which is a separate entity that the New Zealand First Party, Winston's party, created. Their board decided we're going to create a foundation that's going to be our donations vehicle. They're going to receive all the funds and they're going to spend all the money out on our expenses. So the SFO since February is investigating this because they received $500,000 of undeclared donations that was spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars of that was spent on the party's campaign and expenses. And so finally, this week, they have announced that they've charged 2 individuals with serious fraud charges, obtaining by deception. Now, because the board had ring-fenced responsibility for all of the donations around the foundation, no one in the party could be charged. That does not exonerate the party just because legally they couldn't be charged. They have just found the loopholes in our electoral laws, of which there are many, and they have exploited them. And I talked about earlier in the week, what this really shows us is how far our parties, and this is not the first shenanigans that Winston has been part of, and how far and how much energy they're willing to put onto avoiding our rules instead of actually governing, which is what we're all paying them to do, and actually solve our problems.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we also talked about the Green Party solution, proposed solution to this, which I believe is to make sure that every donation comes from an actual New Zealand citizen, so no one can hide behind businesses or trusts or anything like that, and that there is a maximum per year donation for each person. I think those are the 2 key things.
They've set it really high. Yeah, you're right, Geoff. They've set it really high in Goldrose's bill at 35,000.
Monday, 8
Yeah, that is.
With these potential power brokers here. Let's talk about economic recovery post-COVID. New Zealand's facing its worst recession in 100 years. So what?
I don't know if that's just frozen for everyone else.
Hit hard.
No, I don't think it will, because a lot of the government spending that we have is stuff that's been lacquered on election after election as each party tried to buy off a different voting group. And I'll just give you one example. You know, if you're 18 in New Zealand and go to a high decile school, you're one of the luckiest humans to live since we climbed down from the trees. And the Labor government's priority is to give those people even more subsidy through fees-free tertiary, nearly $500 million a year. Can we really afford that for the next decade?
But you want to cut the best start payment, the winter energy payment, and you want benefit levels to go back to pre-COVID levels.
That's right, back to the level that the Labor Party was happy with for the first 2 years. If it's so bad, why didn't they raise it in their first 2 budgets?
But there are more people needing help now, aren't there?
The alternative, well, there may be more people, but do they need more help? The alternative is to borrow so much money that we are not going to balance a budget for 15 years. Kids currently learning to walk will get a driver's license before they see the New Zealand government balance a budget. Now, if everybody else has to reduce their spending, shouldn't the government live within the same means as everybody else? That is actually...
Marlon Davidson, do you think that this is going to affect the poor, affect the vulnerable?
The Reserve Bank is crying out for the government to spend money right now.
I mean,
yeah, slashing our public services has always been terrible for our communities, for our environment, and especially for our climate. The way to revive our communities is to make sure that there is a guaranteed minimum income. The people with the lowest incomes will spend that money immediately in their neighbourhoods, and that is a really important way that we can revive our communities. We also have in our top priority plans a range of sustainable jobs that are going to take us into the future, whether that is insulating homes, solar panels and batteries, transport, agriculture, farming, energy.
But you're talking about your green restoration jobs. Is that enough of an economic powerhouse to get the country going again?
Well, also, we've been very, very clear that those with more than enough can chip in and help us to prevent the big, massive debt that our grandchildren are going to have to bear. So you're talking about your wealth tax, right? Wealth and income tax. It's very, very clear. It is indefensible that so many people are missing out on a decent life, while there are many, many people.
But won't you have to go back to the drawing board on that, because Labor said, we don't want to do that.
Again, the more votes and the more support that we can get. Wait, I'm nearly finished. I'm nearly finished, Simon. Just come down. The more.
Simon's over here.
David,
sorry.
My apologies. The more votes.
We're quite distinct on that.
Again, any party can say what they need to on the campaign trail.
Yeah.
We'll make it very
the way people get a better life is to work, save, and invest. If these guys get in and raise taxes, you're going to see less of that, and all of us be poorer.
Look,
It's not true.
All right. Here's the problem we've got with.
Well,
Mr.
you won't see
Seymour,
the
right?
housing
Greed
prices
is
get
good.
fixed under the
And I
green
understand
beneficial.
that at one level. The problem is that people like Mr. Seymour led the neoliberal economic revolution.
Well, in fairness, I was in kindergarten at the time.
Hang on.
But
let John Taylor finish.
Enough of you playing games. Okay, this is real. This is a real conversation. Okay, so don't take the mickey out of it.
Okay.
The real issue.
The
real issue is when you've got people like this that come from entitlement and privilege and can escape taxes.
Went to a decile one intermediate.
Whatever. I'm talking about your advocacy.
What's your point, John?
My point is that it is right that you take from the greedy and give to the needy.
It's right.
That it is right that we recalibrate this country's moral compass in regard to the way in which we treat the poor in this country. Rather than his policies are going to send our people. You know how he's going to manage us? Build more prisons. How dumb is that?
I don't know if that's his policy.
It's completely untrue.
Yes, Winston Peters, would you like to jump in on this?
Well, you tell these two guys, this is not the American elections. Okay? The second thing is, you can't have welfare without wealth. But the problem we've had, and long before COVID arrived, was the gap between the rich and the poor was growing larger and larger for the last 35 years.
And you've done nothing about that.
Failed neoliberal experiment. First of all, Rogernomics and then Economics. I know a bit about this, and I can realise just what went wrong. And the point is, we can only get ourselves employment if we've got business successful. And if you want to talk about proper taxation policies, it is to help employers to get back, to export, to alternatively have products that we would not be importing because we're making them ourselves, growing them ourselves.
Right.
We can do a lot. One last thing.
This guy's been in government 3 times and he's still saying the same stuff.
We were number 3 in the world in our lifetime, and now we're in the middle and the bottom of the OECD on most stats. And
the only way to achieve that is divest our obsession with housing.
Look, if you borrow on hope, we're going to go bust. If you want to starve your people to wealth, I've seen that before, and it doesn't work.
Let's talk about how we generate some economic activity. John Tamahiri, I mean, I see in your policies that you want to wipe beneficiary debt and double benefits and raise the minimum wage to $25, but Labor said that those policies are going to bankrupt us. So how are you going to, have you costed those?
Yeah, well, everything that we've costed is costed within present budget lines. No, name one thing that my party has actually addressed that's not within a present budget line transference. Okay, right. Whether it's COVID recovery, $20 billion, or whether it's within existing budget.
Can I make the point then that if you are talking about current budgets, you're talking about you want 25%, whānau first, and most of 25% of all the jobs, all the resources. That's just shifting, it's not creating.
No, it's not. You see, here's your problem, right? We've got 40,000 Māori between the ages, I'll give you an example, 14 to 20. Not in employment, not in education, not in training. If you do not get them active as a progressive citizen, they've got nowhere else to go but organised crime. You then have to pay, and here's the number, 2 years of corrections, 2 years of corrections vote is more than all the money paid out in all treaty settlements. Now, who's dumb here? No, who's crazy here? We cannot lock our way up out of this. We have to make our people positive, progressive citizens, and we have to stop being embedded in welfareism.
Okay, sure. So what's the job creation plan?
Well, see, here's all the money being pumped out. Here's our problem. No, there's hundreds of millions of dollars being pumped out into shovel-ready and all this nonsense, right? But the reality is that we're locked out of the opportunity to be connected to it. And that's our problem. We're embedded in the bottom end of town and in the land of our own ancestors, and it's not acceptable.
All right, let's talk to David Seymour. How are you proposing? Is it just the tax cuts that you're going to create jobs with? Is that it?
The tax cuts are important. So we would drop the middle income tax rate between 48 grand and 70 grand from 30 down to 17.5, and we would cut GST by 5 points to 10 for a year, which would circulate an extra 6 billion in the private economy. So that's the start, but it's also our regulatory environment. You know, too many people just say no to developing their own property because it takes longer to get consent under the RMA than to actually build it. We've got to change that. It's too hard to get foreign investment. We say if an investment comes from a friendly, democratic OECD country, then we should reduce the restrictions because we actually need capital.
On the flip side of this, in terms of what you're proposing about beneficiary levels and the like, you're proposing that if somebody has a baby when they're on a benefit, you want to control their spending with an electronic card.
It goes against the
You're taking away
giving
choice
money
there,
to the low incomes will actually stimulate your economy.
If it's choice to spend other people's money, then you've actually got to have some restrictions. And
Is that appropriate?
No, here's the thing. Here's the thing. There should always be a benefit. You know, Nicole McKee, our number 3 candidate, her first husband died. Excuse me. Her first husband died while she was a month away from having her first child. She went on the DPB. It was there for her, and it always should. But the fact that 1 in 10 New Zealand children are born onto a benefit is unacceptable.
Okay. Well, will it apply to the dads as well? If an absent dad is on a benefit, will it apply to them? Will you control their spending as well?
Absolutely, it should.
What do you think about
so
that?
So punitive. They have no idea. They want bigger government and less freedom.
We need to understand that people are doing their best with what they have. But we have kept benefits so low and working wages for the lowest income earners so low that this has created an entrenched generational poverty. Okay. When we support people who are doing their best, that actually is how to give people more choice. When we support people to hold more income support while they choose to go into part-time employment, that is how we support people to make their own decisions.
Okay. Mr. Peters, quickly.
Can we have a short answer from some of these people?
Oh, yeah. Okay, yes. I'm glad you asked that. I'm glad you asked that because now we're just going to go to the break.
Now you're saying quickly. Can I just say this here? Look, Lee Kuan Yew and the Singaporeans proved that you can have high wages if you've got very successful, profitable business. So business taxes are critical here. The idea that's one or the other is so wrong. If you want to be in the first world, you get high wages with great businesses.
Okay, let's do quick fire because you want some quick answers. First of all, I want to know a 4-year term, yes or no, Winston Peters?
Yes, not on this grounds. Look, let's not have a referendum without we all agree midterm that we're going for 4 years and then we'll put it to the people.
Okay.
No.
Okay. David Seymour, 4-year term?
Yes, it's too hard to get good policy done and hasn't this government shown it?
And Madam Davidson?
Yeah, open to it might lead to better decisions, but it does need to be put back to the people as well.
Put it to the people, okay. And last quick fire, if there's a policy from another party you agree with, what would it be? David Seymour?
Well, the last person to promote end-of-life choice was actually Marion Street from Labor, and we're happy to have taken that baton on.
David John Tamihere?
Oh, no, David's my brother.
Yeah.
No, well, that's the Kill the Māori bill he's talking about. We'll talk about that later.
Well,
hang on.
The reality is that there's nothing in his suite that's any good for us. But I'll tell you what, we're closer akin to the Greens, 100%.
Winston Peters?
Yes, and be honest about it, not steal it and say it's your own.
And lastly, Madam, is there...
Did they actually give the policies? I really like what the Māori Party are saying about ruling against Māori and Pacific children, for example, to be expelled and suspended from education. I think that's a proactive policy that needs to be put in place.
We'll leave it there for the moment. Stay with us. We'll be back after the break with more from our power brokers.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. Geoff, can you please explain to people maybe how ACT's policy is completely economically illiterate?
Well, it's just this whole idea about that the government are spending other people's money and that the government manages its money like a household. This whole analogy is a myth, you know, that has been built up over time. It just doesn't exist. At the moment, we've got the Reserve Bank, which is printing money to buy government debt off the banks. So we owe money to ourselves. Now, I do agree with that quality of government spending is important, but right now the government should be spending. It needs to spend more, probably even more than is being spent at the moment. It just needs to be making sure that is focused on really quality spending.
And their whole welfare policy is so absurd. It is bigger government, more expense, so more spending, even though they want to reduce the tax take. So I don't even understand how they're going to fund that. And they don't seem to care. More bureaucracy. And they don't seem to care about freedom when it's putting beneficiaries who they clearly despise under more pressure, under more stress and anxiety, leading to worse depression rates. I just think it's madness.
Yeah. And of course, no one in that segment on poverty talked about, talking about poverty and about stimulating the economy, no one talked about housing. Housing is the leading cause of poverty, and it's also strangling our productive economy because that's where we stick all our money. But no one mentioned that at all. We really need to get the tax system fair so that property's taxed like other assets, so that we invest in businesses that create jobs and exports rather than bidding up the price of housing, which is creating poverty.
It drives me insane that you're right, Geoff. They went through that whole segment and none of them talked about the need to make housing affordable, which is also the more money we're spending every week on our housing costs, that's less money people have available to spend out in the economy and support our businesses and our jobs.
And the answer from the left to that is that we should get government to pay for it through higher benefits, or we should get the businesses to pay for it through higher minimum wages. It's like, why can't we deal to the root cause of the issue, deal to housing? If there's one policy from another party you'd agree with, what would it be, Shai?
I actually got asked this question the other day, and it sounds like the Greens have a really similar health policy to us, even though they haven't really talked about it much. So, you know, ours is a junk food tax, this is a sugar tax.
Welcome back to New South Nations Power Brokers debate. Over the last couple of years,
I'd go with the Māori Party's devolution stuff.
Cast over Oranga Tamariki taking and uplifting Māori babies. It's been a huge issue. So, Marama Davidson, the Māori Party wants a separate agency for Māori children, apart from Oranga Tamariki. Do you support two systems?
What we support is funding, properly resourcing, properly empowering kaupapa Māori-based approaches, which are about making sure that every child is safe and thriving. And that is something that was called for right back from Puao Te Atatū, I think, back in the 80s.
So do you favour Oranga Tamariki doing it, or someone else?
There's a lot of clean-up that they have to do before Māori families or any families trust them.
So
again, we want to see more support for the kaupapa Māori community-driven organisations who know what needs to be done.
So John Tamahiri, you want $600 million to get it off the ground right now, but how can we be sure that you would do a better job immediately?
Because we're doing it right now, and that's in the whānau water space. See, the problem you've got with an agency that is not connected to us, not working with us. Are there some babies that require uplifting? Yes, there are. Mm-hmm. But you don't arrive with the police and you don't cut the umbilical cord and rip the child away from the mother. You arrive with our whānau and we say, no, we're taking this baby because this baby belongs in our community.
Right? Tamariki says it's making steps.
You and I had this conversation before, and actually they're not. And what I need to say to you is that what we need to do is acknowledge that we're big enough, and we are now capable enough and we have capacity to look after our own people. And I don't need an agency paid $700 million a year solely for the Māori clients to feast off our failure. What we need is agencies that fix the problem rather than manage it. And Oranga Tamariki, and you know it, I know it, everyone sitting here knows it, has failed every audit and review possible.
Winston Peters, do you favour a two-system approach?
No, I don't.
Why not?
In the Māori world, children should be a taonga or treasure. And the reality is that there's far too much poverty, which we can deal to with sound policies and sound economic strategies. But in the end, in the Māori world, we know we need a renaissance. We need a reawakening. This idea that you can brutalise your children and remain silent and then blame it on the state is just not right. And there are too many Maori out there in the formal world who understand precisely what I say. I've seen people who are born with poverty know what it tastes and smells and feels like, but they've never resorted to that. But we've got to know, we've got a sheet home responsibility in a cultural sense.
But if a separate Māori agency leads to better outcomes,
we can have all the debates tonight.
thing?
Look, you can have all the debates in the media you like, but the only answer to this problem is an inward reaching and a renaissance and a change in the Maori world, I'm telling you.
This guy's been the biggest handbrake on Māori renaissance, on Māori looking after Māori problems and not making it a Pākehā problem out of all politicians, right? I'm here because I'm proud to be a Māori. I'm not ashamed to be one. And I'm proud of my people because we have solutions. Do we have problems? Yes, we do. Give us a break. Let us fix it.
So
well, let me just tell you this. I was born into a family of 11 children. I know what I'm talking about. My family began life in a tent. So when somebody says that, I've been a handbrake. No, I've been a handbrake against blaming everybody else. The people that came across the Pacific to get here were a magnificent people. They were in the Second World War, the battalion, in the Maori Women's Welfare League, and the Wardens. Please don't tell me we're not capable of doing this as well.
All right, David Seymour, I mean, I've heard you say that you're proud of your Māori heritage. What would you do in this situation?
I remembered sitting with Antoli in Cabinet Committee, helping her argue to form Oranga Tamariki separate from the MSD, and I really thought that after, I think it was 17 previous restructures, this one would do it.
And has it?
No, it hasn't. And what that tells you is that nobody has an answer, despite the bluster and rhetoric. We do need to do better, and ACT is bringing people into Parliament who know about it and are highly committed to fixing it.
That's not true that nobody has an answer. That is not true. The enduring solutions are found at the front line where these challenges are, which include Māori women who have long been saying that our traditional support structures, making sure that we are supporting that whānau-focused kaupapa Māori support structures is where the solutions are.
So I'm going to move on now to another really big issue, a big issue for everybody. It's climate change. David Seymour, you want to scrap the Zero Carbon Act. You want to end the ban on oil and gas exploration. Are you taking climate change seriously?
No.
Absolutely, because the ban on oil and gas exploration just means when we run out of current reserves, we start importing more Indonesian coal with higher emissions. It's got to be the stupidest policy that this government has, and that's really saying something. The next thing I'd say is that we actually need to scrap the Zero Carbon Act because it puts too much power in the hands of the Minister of Climate Change, who can decide if a sector lives or dies. We should never politicise the economy that way. What we should do is have an ETS and tie our carbon price to our top 5 trading partners so that New Zealand firms do their bit, but pay no more and are not disadvantaged in trading with the world.
John Tamahiri.
Look, I get greed
is good. To make a plan and he makes a
the present status quo cannot continue. And we've put Poe in the ground, I'm so talking for the Māori Party, to say, no, we must transition.
Transition. But what are you doing about it? What are your policies?
Well, the Māori Party co-leader won a Court of Appeal judgment against marine mining over in the Taranaki. We are doing that. Motunui decision, 1982. They destroyed our kaimoana. Hang on. They destroyed our kaimoana just in mining our own seabeds without our consent.
Policy.
Well, the policy is we want...
all I can see is you want $1 billion for solar panels installation on But that's not a climate change policy. It's more of a health policy.
No. Firstly, you've got to put the Poe in the ground to say
energy efficiency is a climate change policy,
destroying
and a health
the
policy,
environment and our economy,
financial policy.
Shift to a new economy. And if you don't put the Poe in the ground and say that, they will continue to mine it out to the end of the earth.
Okay, look, Winston Peters, you have been part of this government, and yet you blocked the government's clean vehicle fee-based scheme. What do you have against electric cars?
Well, you're not going to slide by that quickly. The National Party and the ACT Party went to Paris in 2015, signed up to the Paris Accord, and we've been trying to fix it up ever since. Our international buyers of our product will determine this issue, because if we don't comply, then we'll lose our market. The real issue is this: we can get to where we want to get to in 2020, with the Climate Change Commission has been put in place.
What's he even saying?
When he talked about EVs...
Does he want to pull out of Paris?
For poor people, the cost would have been prohibitive. That's why we said...
So you are in favour of electric vehicles?
And here's my point to the Greens is, when you had your conversation and discussion, negotiation with the Labour Party before the last election, it was for you to win then, not come along and try and change everybody else's policy after it.
Marama Davidson.
What is he
this
even saying? We're
policy,
coming back
this
to that in
issue
the
should
ads.
define the Green Party. But has James Shaw bowed to farmers who still aren't paying for emissions and aren't likely to 2025, and even then it's going to be a 95% discount?
So just firstly, the Greens in government have put in place the strongest action for climate change in 3 decades. We, because of being in government, have stopped new offshore oil and gas exploration. And
So, of
yes,
course
we
you did
are
more.
finally bringing farming emissions into the ETS.
Like all to a little bit is a great summary.
You are. But
Yes,
is
we
it soon
are.
enough? I mean, it's like 2025 and they're going to pay 5%.
And we've said that we will review that as well and check whether or not we've made enough progress. But we do need a just transition. We do need to make sure we are both supporting farmers to move to cleaner farming methods, as well as putting limits on nitrates and nitrogen, which we have already, and synthetic fertilisers, which we have also outlined in our farming plan.
Okay. Last, we're just going to have some quick fire questions here before we go to the break. And this time it's, can you tell me, starting with you, Winston Peters, what is the worst mistake you've made last term?
This term?
Well, this term,
This
yeah.
term?
It's still going, I know. Yeah.
Because of cabinet rules, I can't tell you.
Wow, we'll have to get hold of that somehow. What about smoking outside at a non-smoking university?
Well, okay. If you want to know a real thing, here we've got governments, Labor and National, talking about smoke-free 2025. Then you're going to have a marijuana referendum coming up very shortly. But just to make sure it's not even true, the tax for tobacco and cigarettes have gone past $2 billion and are rising, and they've got no sincerity about it. We're going to stop them ripping off poor people. It'll be $20
$20 a packet.
$20
right,
a packet.
Okay. So is that the
And
worst
it's
thing
my
you've done?
business to buy one, have a fag outside, not yours.
You can have a fag outside. You have to go outside though. John Tamahiri, what's the worst thing you've done in the last? I know you're not in at the moment, but what's the worst thing you've done in the last sort of term?
Oh, I forgot our wedding anniversary last week. So,
From a political point of view?
Well, I've been on the couch for a while, but you know, so.
All right.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, David Seymour, what's the worst thing you've done this term?
Paso Doble.
I think maybe we can all agree on that one. Okay, Marama Davidson, what's the worst thing that you've done?
I watched Paso Doble.
Eggs.
All right.
You watched Dancing with the Stars, Shai?
I actually did. I actually love Dancing with the Stars, but that's
I
not the
bet you
point.
do. I bet you do.
I was a huge Laura fan, so I was very stoked that she won. But that's irrelevant, and there is a lot to unpack there. Let's start with ACT's ridiculous position on climate change, Geoff.
It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, this whole idea that the Zero Carbon Act gives extraordinary power to the climate change minister is just false. Can we have an independent fact checker on that, because it's not true.
But it's just dog whistling. Like, he just says stuff that is just dog whistling. And he is the only MP that voted against our zero carbon bill. And now he wants to act as though, but he does actually care about climate change. No, you don't. All it was a framework, a plan to make a plan, a framework to ensure that action is taken in the future. It wasn't action in itself, but it was a step in the right direction. And he voted against it. He doesn't care.
No, absolutely not. Also, I mean, that whole conversation about Oranga Tamariki. I mean, I'm a big fan of letting communities have more say over the services that affect them. So, can really ally with what the Māori Party are saying there. But
it does seem to be almost ignoring the opportunities for improvement. And I have been hearing that Oranga Tamariki knows they have a lot of work to do and have actually been trying to front foot far more iwi engagement, which is what they should have been doing all along. So yes, it has come far too late, but hopefully there is an opportunity there to change that.
Yeah, true. What else? Gee, there was so much.
Winston's ridiculousness on climate change. I just want to say this. If anyone is watching right now and you were thinking of voting ACT, if you care about climate change and you think it is one of the biggest issues our society and our world is facing, you cannot vote ACT.
And you're right. New Zealand First doesn't make
first.
any sense either, because I mean, what was he even talking about
I
with Paris
could
there?
not follow. He's like, we need to fix it. Like, you can't go and refix that agreement. You either just pull out, or it is what it is. It's an agreement from 2016. I don't know what he's talking about. 2015.
Yeah.
2016.
But even the Greens, when they start focusing on climate change, I mean, they're chasing rainbows. Solar panels
So
on
the
everyone's roof.
candidates,
That's
let's
not the best
talk
investment we can
housing.
make.
The
It's energy
housing crisis
efficiency.
dominated last election, seems to have fallen off into the backburner of this one. Winston Peters, house prices are still going up. We've got a shortage of 56,000. Is this a failure of the government that you've been part of?
In part
Yes.
it is, and we've admitted it
Yes.
with respect to one program, which I wasn't responsible for. You know what it is. I'm not going to mention the person's name.
Kiwi World, everybody.
Yeah, but if you talk about the Housing Corporation, they've gone damn busters on building houses. Private housing has been the highest since 1974. But here's the point. We inherited a massive demand with infinitesimal supply, and we've got to turn it around, and we haven't done it so yet.
Yeah, so it's a failure. Okay, because we're talking
And
about
no
affordable
one
housing.
came
We're
in
not
with
talking
the
about social
plan
housing. David,
actually
you want to
works.
cut red tape, but so far the free market has basically, ensured high prices. If you cut red tape even further, we're just going to see more
I
of
beg your
that.
pardon, which free market? You've got a government that regulates to the hilt how people can develop their land, a government that has a monopoly on infrastructure or controls the funding of it, and a government that mandates that councils have to do building inspections, and they do it badly. Just look at leaky buildings. There is no free market, and that's the problem. What we need to do is replace the Resource Management Act with an Urban Development Act based on the Productivity Commission's Better Urban Planning. Start funding infrastructure properly by giving councils half the GST on new builds so they have money to build it and an incentive.
Oh,
to
that's our
give
policy.
consent.
Thanks, David.
And actually allow private consenting of new builds, because at the moment the
But
councils
only
do
half.
it, they have no
Only half the
expertise in
GST.
it, they're risk averse, and they mean that we have so little innovation and so few new materials.
Okay.
New Zealanders are over a barrel. It's too hard to build a new house and people can't afford them.
So you were just
What's
having a
David
bit of a
going to
laugh
do
there,
when they
John.
fix
Why
the
is that?
RMA and house prices still increase? What's he going to blame
The
then?
elephant in the room is anyone owning 2, 3, 4 or 5 houses go to a casino in this country that they never can lose on. There's no tax on it. And so the problem we've got in pricing other Kiwis out of the market is the fact that we reward those that are already in it.
Right,
But
but
countries have taxed their way to housing affordability?
So, there's
Jeff can list a few in the break.
packages within the Māori policy.
Actually, David, we
No,
can teach you about that.
You should read
So
it.
just to finish up, John.
It's good to hear John talking about this stuff,
So there's
though.
a whole range of issues that we've got going on here. Firstly, it's affordability. So
Yeah.
how the hell is Māori? You know the Māori average income from the 2018 census is $24,300. How the hell do we get on?
So how do we
top of
make
that?
the houses affordable? I mean, that is the key question.
Well, you
Madam
make it
Davidson-
easier to build them. I mean,
Yeah, okay, so
Greens-
Madam
it's simple.
Greens have been very clear that we need to prioritise public and community and iwi providers, make sure that we commit to government spending enough to clear the waiting list in 5 years,
Right.
which means that we have to prioritise public housing as well as
They haven't come
empower
close to
community
keeping up with
iwi
demand for the
housing
last 3
providers to
years.
build a non-profit rental sector. It is
Demand,
not defensible at all. The way that things are currently going are causing hardship for too many people, and we have to change
Just quickly,
that.
Winston Peters, you wanted to jump in on
Well,
housing.
look, first of all,
How you feel about affordable
radically
house?
reform the resource management legislation, which National passed in 1991. The second thing got to do is have a huge investigation into pricing, because it's 35% higher than Australia's.
Okay.
The last thing you've
Oh,
got
building
to do
supplies. Well, that's good.
is
Thanks,
give
Winston.
He's
the
talking about
housing
supplies, that's
plan
great.
to a whole lot of practical people, not a bunch of bureaucrats in Wellington.
All right, well,
That's
let's
what
move on to social housing, right? So look, the waiting list is almost 20,000 households waiting for a state house, okay? So Madam David, so this is close to your house.
It was
but you
only
promised
5 when Labour
5,000
came along, by the
social
way.
houses. That still leaves people out in the streets.
Well, again, we will, alongside clearing the waiting list in 5 years, so, you know,
can clear it in 5 years.
being able to build
But 5,000
5,000.
doesn't equal 5 years, does it?
Well, alongside that, alongside building 5,000 homes a year, we will again allow for community and iwi housing providers to build non-profit
Right, so
rental
you've
sector
answered that
homes
question
and a progressive home ownership scheme, which we've already
How?
started, rent-to-own type model, which was already started, and will
That's
keep
not social
funneling
housing.
investment. Well, no, it all works.
Focusing
it
on
all
social
works
housing is
to making sure
not
that
gonna
more
fix the
people
problem.
have got
I mean,
affordable.
it's good. but
Ambulance
it's
at the
not
bottom of the
Okay,
cliff.
John Tamahiri, I'm going to end you
long-term
there. John Tamahiri, you want 50% of all state housing for Māori.
Well, we're 50% of the waiting list in the land of our ancestors. Now, hang on, that's point one. But let's
So
get back.
what happens to the people that are already...
Let's get back to supply.
What happens to the tenants? What happens to the tenants that are already in state housing?
See, the problem,
50%
the problem we've got in social housing...
Are you going to answer that?
The problem we've got in social housing is simply this. We're not, one, building enough, and two, we've got a whole bunch of people in the country right now that have been given them in preference to Māori. And
so what happens to the people that are already in the State House if you want to have, because Māori are 37% of the State House tenants at the moment, okay? And so that's, you're going to have to kick people out.
Out of the 20,000 families on waiting lists, 10,000 are Māori, right? In any electoral cycle, 3 years, 1/3 of our people are kicked out of their tenancy. How can their babies educate themselves? How can they have a proper health service unless we sort social housing out? And Māori, I'm telling you right now, we're the tangata whenua, we're the mana whenua. We've got a preference, and I want 50% of those houses to house 10,000 of my family.
All right, let's move on to our last topic, which is ihu mātau. So look, we're waiting and waiting and waiting for a deal here. Winston Peters, you said you've halted a deal 3 times. Why? What did you say no to?
Ihu mātau has already been part of a Treaty of Waitangi settlement.
No.
It is the Tainui settlement, and I was there when it happened. Now, please do not have the idea that you can bust open this settlement without the rest will be busted open as well.
Okay, John.
And it's just wrong.
Okay.
It's wrong to not tell the people the true facts behind this matter.
1840, the treaty was signed. 1863, that land was stolen. Confiscated. Yeah. By state.
So what's the answer? What's the answer?
Well,
just give it back.
If someone steals something from you, if someone steals something from you, you hand it back.
So, Marama Davidson, does that mean that this is going to, if you give it back, it's going to open up all kinds of other treaty negotiations?
No, there are lots of ways, lots of solutions to make sure that there is a peaceful resolution to this. I'm really proud that we've got this young, new generation of Māori leaders who are demanding true tiriti justice. That is why the Greens were very clear and asked the Prime Minister to halt their development, supporting the kaitiaki on the front line, and sit down at the table to come up with a peaceful resolution. And that is happening.
That is happening.
That is happening.
But it hasn't happened yet.
The talks are happening. The building has been halted. Yay,
David Seymour, what is the answer?
Look, the answer now is extremely difficult. We need, no matter who our ancestors were, a system of the rule of law and property rights. That's the only way you get prosperous and solve the problems we're talking about tonight. But right now, because the Prime Minister decided in a dispute to side with the squatters and undermine legal property rights, it's now extremely difficult.
Does he acknowledge the property rights that Māori had when...
No, he doesn't.
Jacinda Ardern has done. I think whoever wins this election is going to have to think
property rights that he
likes. It's okay if it works for Pākehā. Thanks, David, for clarifying your priority.
Okay, all right. I do need to wrap this up. I'm sorry, we're going to wrap this up. So finally, from all of you, I just want a quick closing statement about why people should be voting for you. Who are you pointing to? You want to go last, do you? Madam Davidson.
The Greens in government have done more for climate action than in 3 terms while addressing inequality and protecting our environment. But we must go further and faster, including in our response to COVID-19. Labour need the Greens so we make better decisions. Greens in government will make sure that we get stronger action for climate change, ending inequality, protecting nature, thinking of our mokopuna, party vote Green.
Okay. David Seymour.
Zero bargaining power.
The world has just changed and our country is going to have to change with it. ACT's a party that stood on principle against every other party, but also worked with every other party to get legislation passed. And through this COVID period, we've offered constructive criticism when necessary. We've made helpful suggestions where possible. And that is the kind of contribution that we're going to need to get back to recovery, to get our way of life back, and do it as
he has been the most effective opposition MP, to be fair.
Is for more ACT MPs making that contribution, because the only problem with ACT MPs is there aren't enough of them.
Yeah. John Tamahiri, what your final statement?
Oh, yeah, look, I just want everyone to know that from here to eternity, we're not going anywhere, the tangata whenua. And from here to eternity, we will seek justice and righteousness and fairness about our rights to break out of the bottom end, structurally embedded in the bottom end of the land of our ancestors. And if the truth of that upsets others, so be it. But it's our truth, and we'll speak it.
Winston Peters, final statement, please.
Look, 3 years of stable government through crisis after crisis has not been easy, but we did it. But the reality is that experience and common sense is important in government. You've got to be not on training wheels. You've got to know what you're going to do next because you've got the experience. And the reality is, out there,
He has no
there are hundreds of
policies.
thousands of New Zealanders who
It's
need some
incredible.
insurance in
He's
this
playing the
campaign.
experience
You
card
don't
now. He's always
take
been
that pathway,
the
you
outsider,
get risky, you get careless.
keeping them
Give a
honest.
massive
Now
lurch to
it's
the left after this
strong,
election,
stable government.
and all for many New Zealanders will be lost. So buy some insurance. Party
Buy
vote
some
New Zealand first.
Okay. And that is our final closing
Insurance
statement.
Thank you very
or
Winston Peters,
a
thank you very much.
handbrake to keep
That's
us
it for our
back in the
candidate section of this Power
1970s.
Brokers debate. Winston Peters, Marama Davidson, John Tamahiri, Dave Siwanamihinui, thank you so
Let's-
much for your time.
Thank you.
After the break, how did they perform? Tune in for our political panel.
Let's unpack that housing conversation, because actually between all of them, they covered a lot of the important points. So John Tamahiri talking about the tax system. Of course, the Māori Party proposals won't solve the tax system issue, but he is at least talking about the right things. David Seymour talking about RMA reform, which is important. Although, of course, what ACT are talking about there will lead to urban sprawl rather than building up in our cities, around our public and active transport networks, which is what we need to bring emissions down.
Which is just absurd. It just shows how tone deaf he is. Have you not? He lives in Auckland. He has seen that we have lost key agricultural land around our city outskirts that we are never going to get back. That creates the jobs and exports that he's so concerned about in the first place.
Yeah. So he's talking in the right area, but that's a bit problematic. He's also talking about local government funding, which is good. They've got a similar policy to that to us. He's talking about half the GST. We're talking about all the GST on new developments, giving that back to local authorities. It's funny because he's oscillated on that policy. Sometimes he backs it. Sometimes he puts the boot into local authorities. He really picks and chooses his policies. ACT's policy has changed so much during this
it just
election
depends
campaign.
who he's talking to.
Yeah.
Who does he need to dog whistle to today? That just no credibility at all.
Yeah. Winston Peters talking about building supplies. That was excellent. I think he was talking about building supplies.
Yeah, I hope he was. Yeah.
Yeah. So we definitely need some work there to sort out the monopoly on building supplies. And of course, Marama Davidson talking about social housing and community housing. If we put all of those together and actually all of them had plans that would work, then we could solve the housing crisis.
Which is TOP's policy.
Yeah. Although they didn't talk about monetary policy.
I was just about to say,
thing.
and the sixth being quantitative easing.
Yeah. None of them mentioned that one, but still, it is promising to see other political parties starting to talk about all of the issues. So again, TOP has had an impact on this election in terms of getting these sorts of issues on the agenda. So that's really good to see. There was also talk about poverty in that section. I think you were saying that poverty's gotten worse, Shai.
Inequality has gotten worse.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Someone can fact check how many of the poverty action indicators we're worse on.
7 of the 9 have gotten worse. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so a couple have improved, but it really is housing that is
exactly
continuing to drive that problem.
That's just it, Geoff. And when the biggest driver of this problem is getting worse, you cannot sit there at this panel and tell us you've been doing a good job. You have not been doing what you were meant to do. Fix the housing crisis, which you didn't do.
Yeah. Well, the fact is that none of the parties that were in power in this term actually came in with an understanding of what the issues are facing New Zealand. I do think over this 3 years, they have started to realise some of the issues. Like I said, I think across the political parties now, we're starting to get all the bits of the different piece of the puzzle are starting to pop up in the conversation. But we need all of them in the next term of government to solve the problem. So it doesn't exactly fill me with a whole lot of hope.
But overall, I mean, when we're talking about the policies that we keep hearing from these parties, you have ACT on the one side that are all about austerity and making life harder for our poorest, which is so short-sighted and it's so populist, because populist policies only care, or populist, dog whistlers only care about policies. They do not give a crap about the outcomes.
Yeah,
but when you
and not only is it bad for poverty, Shai, but it would be disastrous for the economy. I mean, ACT's austerity would absolutely tank our economy, because we need that money coming from government right now. The Reserve Bank is saying to the government, please spend more money to keep inflation going, because if inflation goes below zero, in other words, if we go into deflation, then that is when the proverbial starts hitting the fan. That's what we saw in places like Greece, that it's a debt deflation spiral. When prices start dropping, people hold back on spending because they're waiting for prices to drop even more. And when prices are falling, that means the value of your debt is rising in real terms. It would be disastrous for our economy, but that is what ACT's policy is likely to lead to. So it's complete
illiterate.
It's economic vandalism. Anyway, that's my rant.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right, Geoff, and it drives me absolutely insane that journalism and reporters who have been talking about ACT's policies have not been pointing this out. There has been barely any critical analysis of those policies that are being proposed. Where is it? Where are the public being informed about how dangerous that approach would be?
Yeah, well, I mean, the issue really is that we don't have many very good economic journalists left in the country. I mean, our media has been hollowed out thanks to Facebook and Google, and I think it is really showing in the specialist media end. I mean, there's Bernard Hickey and Rod Oram in Newsroom, and there's good stuff going on at interest.co.nz. Janae Tibshirani and Gareth Vaughan. But I mean, and the Herald still have some good people working on the business side too, although the Herald are never going to say anything about our housing market because their biggest advertiser is real estate. So there's some real compromise, conflicts of interest there. So yeah,
Definitely.
I mean, our media is on these sorts of really big economic issues. Not only are our politicians not up to scratch. I asked, I was in a debate with Grant Robertson the other night, and I asked him about monetary policy, and he just didn't respond. He kind of waffled through the answer. Our politicians are not across issues that are
disturbing, Geoff, that our Minister of Finance can't have a conversation with you about monetary policy. Like that, that genuinely disturbs me. And you are the only leader of any political party who is actually an economist.
Yeah. And it kind of makes me wonder what advice they're getting behind the scenes, if any, to be honest. But yeah, the lack of political capability, the lack of capability in our media, given the issues that we're facing, is disconcerting, I have to say.
Yeah, and I just wonder, trying to put my unbiased hat on, what did voters get out of that panel this morning? Did they really get a thorough explanation of each of the different, not just proposals, but outcomes? I honestly think the outcomes part is completely missed from so many of these conversations, and something that I've been noticing a lot recently, that you hear politicians say, we're going to do these three things. They do not say the consequences of those three things. They just say, these are the three things we'll do.
Yeah, well, it's very
Outcomes
simple.
matter.
Yeah, it's very simple political messaging, right? That's what everyone's focused on. it's slogans, and that's what we got in this debate today. Any thoughts on the conversation about ihumātao as well, Shai? That was also
Yeah,
covered in
that
last
came
segment.
up. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. So I would recommend, if anyone is still watching, I recommend you go and either find, there's a great article in Newsroom and also I think on RNZ, and they go through the history of the ihumātao and what has actually gone on there, to explain that it wasn't actually part of a treaty settlement. And I remember them setting that out really well. I'll try and find it and chuck it in the comments later, because this idea that Winston keeps going on about how it was already in a part of a settlement, that's not the full story actually.
Yeah.
And it's really misleading.
Yeah, and even since because this is even if it were part of the Tainui Treaty settlement, because I think ihumātao is in Tainui territory, there have been breaches since that settlement. There have been continued treaty breaches that apply to this area, this piece of land. And this is what I think a lot of Kiwis really need to get their head around, particularly in Te Ao Pākehā. We have that whole treaty settlement process to deal with previous breaches. And we are, Māori are generally settling for between 1 and 2 cents in the dollar of the value of their claim. So we're getting, Te Ao Pākehā is getting an extremely good deal out of that settlement process. But even when that stuff is settled, that doesn't put this whole issue to bed, because the treaty is a living document. It needs to be honoured, not just settled. And
That's
so
the thing. It's not a point in time. No,
and since that settlement, there are ongoing breaches. So we're actually creating more problems for the future right now by not honouring the treaty. And one of the most classic examples of that is around local government has a requirement in their act to honour the treaty principles and work in partnership with local iwi in terms of particularly resource management issues. And yet most local governments don't have any framework set up for interacting with local iwi. Those local governments that have tried to set up, for example, Māori wards to make sure that there is Māori representation on the council, they have been, that's often been voted down by referendum. So there's a real issue in local government about that we are not honouring Te Tiriti right now. And that you can see those breaches popping up in ihumātao. When you look at the detail, there's lots of little breaches that have happened since that Tainui settlement, because iwi haven't been talked to about a lot of the resource management decisions that are going on. So we're really making a rod for our own back here for the future by not understanding that the treaty continues past settlements. It needs to be honoured, not settled.
And it comes back, Geoff, again and again to complete lack of education in our history and understanding, that the treaty is the basis on which our entire society is meant to be living.
Yeah.
It's just not a point in time. Oh, cool, we've settled it, it's done. No, that is not how it works. But yeah, I honestly think there's just a huge misunderstanding out there. But yeah. Cool,
again,
that is, we're probably at, I'm saying we've just gone over our hour, which we were meant to try and stick to. So we tried.
Yeah. But that was great. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks always, Shai. It was great to interact. And we'll see you next week. I believe I'm coming up to Auckland, so it'll be good to catch up then.
Yes, I know, it'll be great.
Release of our democracy policy, amongst other things.
Yep. And leaders debate. The next leaders debate is 7 p.m. on Thursday, and we will be doing this again.
But I will be in Auckland, Shai. So,
Yeah.
so do I come to your place, or
Yeah,
do
we'll
we
be
go-
in the
or
same. We can be in the same box on the
frame?
screen for people. Be great.
Woohoo! All right, cool. Well, we'll see you then. Ka kite anō. Have a nice weekend.
Get out
And go vote.
top.
Yeah, you can start voting.